But I mean, you can suddenly find yourself creating very severe problems for farmers. I mean, believe it or not, people take agricultural machinery onto this dual carriageway. But the alternative is for agricultural machinery to go very, very long and circuitous routes. And that has to be addressed if we're going to do junction closures.
What sort of solutions would you suggest? Because both for safety and capacity reasons, farm access, other kinds of activity, housing, petrol stations and so on, shops, do give direct access onto the A12 with traffic coming past at 70 plus mile an hour. What do you suggest we should do about that?
Well, I mean, take Marks Tay, for example, where the old London Road still exists alongside the dual carriageway and the approach to the junction travelling northwards. You couldn't justify closing the direct access to, say, the CF Anderson side without addressing the access at the end of that road onto the A120 and onto the roundabout junction, because at the moment that absolutely seizes up. But I mean, all these have got to be looked at in a very bespoke and detailed way. But the caveat I make, I think, is an important one, in order that any solutions that are proposed actually address all the problems that are going to arise from any junction closures.
Yeah.
Which they should.
Yeah. Anything else you want to draw out in terms of no-go?
Well, I mean, some people talk about an M12 motorway. I mean, that to me would require an entirely new road, or a very substantial realignment of the existing road, and I think that would be we would be losing public consent on that. And obviously, any displacement of housing or established business is going to be controversial.
But you also say you don't want a new route, even if it isn't an M12. You don't want sections of a new route. I mean,
I think an entirely new alignment is a last resort.
I mean, if you're saying, and
it's got to be demonstrably would it be the last resort.
Yeah. If you're saying, and I understand this from a local point of view, that you don't want to restrict access, you want farm vehicles still to be able to go on the A12.
Well, unless, except where, and ideally, there would be an alternative provided.
You don't want local access closed, and so we'd then be left with the A12 as a multi-purpose road with access, junctions close together, etc. And one obvious solution to that would be, well, let's actually find a different route, because if we can't close off the access and make it a high-speed road without these risks and dangers of accidents and so on, then isn't it better to find a new route?
Well, what I'm concerned about is that there isn't going to be the money for the new route, and therefore all the attributes of a major road, with all junction closures and all the restrictions on access and all the inconvenience for local people, is therefore going to be applied to the existing road. And I don't think that's an acceptable solution. I also am concerned that cutting a new swathe through the countryside in a county that already feels very overdeveloped and very pressured by development is going to be extremely controversial and unpopular. And I think I'm reflecting popular sentiment.
Yeah.
I think people don't regard a wholly new road as necessary. And in any case, I find it very difficult to justify. I mean, I don't know if you've ever travelled up the M74 parallel to the old A74. It seems an awful lot of investment was squandered on the old A74 before we built the new M74. And to have two dual carriageways travelling in parallel to each other seems incredibly wasteful in a county that's very, very short of space.
Although both of us are aware in recent decades of new lines of route through greenfields being built, but I take your point. Personally, we have heard nothing to my mind, that would justify or stand up a case for something called the M12 on a completely new line of route. And in the practical world, if it's difficult enough, and it's hitherto has been very difficult to find the sums of money just to take it to Dual 3 all the way to Colchester, the thought of finding the sums of money for a brand new motorway seemed to me to be vanishingly small as possible. I think Dave's point is slightly, maybe slightly subtler, which I think, which is most of this road would remain as is, but it is just possible that there might be at least one section where, if you want to preserve accesses, etc., the only solution really might be a new line of route just for that section. But
that's all I'm saying. I'm really trying to
I would
to bring together the two aspects of what you're saying in your "please don't do it" list. On the one hand, you're saying, please don't take local accesses away, and please don't make it more difficult for people who live there. But at the same time, you're saying, please don't actually find a different alignment so we can solve the problem of congestion, accidents, etc., without affecting local people.
But I would say the answer to that is to build new minor roads to link the existing accesses to major junctions. I mean, take on the very edge of my constituency, the Copford turn-off. Travelling south, you turn left to Copford and Easthorpe. And there used to be an access through the dual carriageway, Central Reservation at that point. That's been closed off because that was a very dangerous right-hand turn. I used to do it myself with my horse in my mouth. But that road needs some way of addressing that access needs to be addressed so that people travelling into the countryside from the Marks Tay turn-off don't all then turn towards Copford and then down through School Road and go through, and it'll create a new rat run, when a rat run down a residential road
so we're looking
instead of a rat run down a